Hello friends! Today I want to share with you some book, movie, TV show, and activities to make you feel all of the autumn vibes. Just suck you into a big massive pumpkin spice hug. This time of year is when I feel most myself. My soul just feels so alive. Autumn is the one season, I think, where the aesthetic is just so heavy and dense. You can feel it in the smells, in the activities, in the scary movies. Brown and orange leaves, the smell of the pumpkin candles and pumpkin bread, pumpkin everything. So I'm so excited to share all these with you guys. I do have 4 to 5 recommendations for each category, but if you'd like more, I do have lists on this app called Likewise, which is perfect because Likewise is the sponsor of today's video. I've worked with them before. I absolutely love them. They have been so supportive of my channel, so thank you so much to Likewise for sponsoring. So how Likewise works is, say you finish reading an amazing dark academia book like The Secret History, and you really want to read something else like it, but you don't know where to look and you don't want to spend all day Googling, and that is where Likewise comes in. It is a completely free app that you can download. It will ask you what types of books, movies, and TV shows you're interested in, and then give you specific recommendations based on those interests. And on top of that, every day you receive recommendations that you can swipe through. So say you're looking through some books and you saw a book that you've recently read and you enjoyed. So you'll press the little red button and then it will ask you if you enjoyed it, and you can say yes, and then it will give you future recommendations based on that book. It's like magic. But my favorite thing is probably the asks function. You can ask the Likewise community for any book, movie, or TV show recommendation, and it's crazy how fast you get responses. I recently asked for perfect autumn books to read that aren't scary, and I started getting recommendations within seconds. You can also create lists that you can refer to, like a dark academia films list, and you can share that with your friends, or you can just refer to it in the future for yourself. You can come look at my lists, you can look at other people's lists. It's such a great way to get recommendations. It's one of my favorite apps. I use it all the time whenever I need recommendations, and it never fails me. So if you'd like more autumn book, movie, and TV show recommendations than just the ones that I'll be sharing in this video, you can go check out my lists on Likewise. You can go to on.likewise.com/darlingdesi2, and I will have it linked down in the description box as well. Just click on the link, get the app. Like I said, it's completely free, and then you can scroll through my lists and so many other amazing lists and get some great recommendations for autumn. I am at darling_desi, and I will see you over there. All right, on to the recommendations. Let's start with the books. Autumn is my favorite season for reading. It just makes you feel the leaves falling off the trees and the wind sweeping through a cemetery. So this first book is a classic for a reason. That is The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Just the aesthetic for this one alone, the Victorian and Edwardian period in London, and the fashion, I mean, come on. I love the vintage detective vibes. This would be perfect for putting on a nightgown, lighting some candles, and reading by candlelight, maybe grabbing some hot chocolate and just letting yourself get sucked into the story. Personally, my favorite one is The Hound of the Baskervilles. This one is so entertaining all the way through, and it is known to be one of his most beloved books. So if you don't really know where to start, I would recommend starting here. This next one is by the master of aesthetic autumn writing, and that is Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. If you're going to read any author during autumn, I would recommend Ray Bradbury or Neil Gaiman. If you want to feel all of the autumn vibes seep into your bones, look no further than Ray Bradbury. Reading this almost feels like reading poetry. The way that he writes about autumn is so beautiful. It paints the most autumnal picture in your mind. It's about these two 13-year-old boys and their encounter with this spooky carnival that comes to their town a week before Halloween. I imagine reading this one maybe at a university campus, out on a bench. It's a bit windy, a bit cold, but something about feeling cold and hearing those leaves just adds more to the experience of reading this masterpiece. Okay, next up is Magic Lessons by Alice Hoffman. This is the prequel to Practical Magic, which you might have seen the movie adaptation of, starring Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman. These books are more on the cozy autumnal side. They make you feel like a warm sweater and a pumpkin spice latte sitting at a coffee shop. The series follows these two sisters who are witches who try and fail at breaking away from their magical lineage. It's set in New England, and yeah, all of the books are so good. I love this series so much. Next up is one that I just recently finished, and it is Small Favors by Erin A. Craig. This story is very reminiscent of The Village, if you've seen that movie. It's creepy in a way without being scary. It's set in the small town of Amity Falls, where this community starts to notice these things in the woods, and they think they're wolves, but they see their eyes watching them, and weird things start to happen in town. Items start to go missing. Some new people show up in town, and there's a lot of unease about who they are and where they came from and if they should accept them into their community. And the whole time you're wondering what's going on in the woods. The whole town is surrounded by these bells that are there to alert them if these beings in the woods become too close. It is so creepy and is so intriguing. I could not put this down. I read this book in 2 days. And then the last book that I have to share is one that I'm currently reading, and that is The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter by Theodora Goss. And what I love about this one is that it has so many well-loved characters that we already know from other books like Sherlock Holmes and Watson. It has references to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and this one actually follows his daughter, Mary Jekyll. And basically the story is about these girls who have these powers, like this one girl, if she breathes anywhere near you, she can poison you, who are essentially seen as monsters. So it's about these monster girls who solve mysteries in the Victorian period, coming together to stop these men and people who treat them as inhuman. If you're interested in the Sherlock Holmes aesthetic, but you don't want to read Sherlock Holmes, so like Victorian London, solving mysteries, detectives, monster girls, then I would definitely recommend this one for you. So next, let's move on to TV shows. I listed so many of my favorites in my video from last year. I will link it up here if you want to go check it out. I will be repeating one though. This will be on every list I ever share, and that is Gilmore Girls. Season 1, episode 7, it's perfect. You see Lorelai and Rory walking, surrounded by pumpkins on the sidewalk. They dress up as pilgrims. If you like the fall nostalgia feeling, I think you would love Gilmore Girls. The 90s fashion, the writing, the dialogue.
Because I haven't had any clean underwear for 3 days. So right now under your skirt you're wearing not underwear. Mom! It's kind of nice actually, breezy. My role model, ladies and gentlemen.
Also, we see a lot of scenes of Rory. She goes to a prestigious private school, so that's perfect for back to school season, autumn. Literally everything about the show is perfect, just go watch it. Now, if you want something a bit more intense and creepy, I recommend Bates Motel, which is a retelling slash prequel to Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock, one of my favorite directors. It follows Norman Bates prior to Psycho, and we kind of see how he develops and honestly kind of how he becomes more creepy and more creepy as the seasons go on. I think it's set in Northern California. She's in Northern California or somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. They did a great job at making it feel really eerie, down to the house that they live in, the furniture inside, the color grading, the way that it's very kind of dark and the colors aren't really saturated. It's just peak creepy autumn aesthetic. Is there murder? Yes, but it's not very scary. Desi here. I just want to say I highly recommend looking up trigger warnings for this one, because now that I'm thinking about it, I think there's definitely some content in this show that could definitely be triggering for some people. Another one of my absolute favorites is Sherlock. If you have not watched this show, you are missing out. It is phenomenal. This is a contemporary version of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes, set in London. It is very, very, very aesthetic. Tweed jackets and button-ups. Literally everything is so on point, even down to his shoes. A lot of the episodes do take place during autumn, and it's fun because every episode there's a new mystery. This is one of the shows that I was so sad when we finished, and I still won't give up on the fact that they need to make another season because I loved it so much. And then another favorite is Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?, which is the classic Scooby-Doo, the very first cartoon of Scooby-Doo, not any of the newer movies or shows, no. Obviously the monsters aren't scary and the mysteries are so easy to figure out, but it's not about that. It's about going out on a Saturday morning, grabbing some donuts, if it's closer to Halloween, maybe some pumpkin spice donuts, coming home, grabbing some orange juice and watching Scooby-Doo. Me and Jared watched it a couple Saturdays ago and it was actually so fun. It was so nostalgic and brought me back to my childhood, reminded me that life doesn't have to be serious all the time. Serious stuff is boring. Sometimes it's okay to feel like a kid again. Sometimes we all need that. This next one is my favorite show of all time, and that is Laid Back Camp or Yuru Camp. This is an anime, and it's about these girls who go camping on the weekends, but they go during autumn and winter because there aren't any bugs and there are less people. It's a pure serotonin boost. Nothing bad happens in this show. It's just these girls going camping by lakes, on mountains and fields and meadows, and you see the leaves. The happiest, warmest hug of a show I have ever seen. This is my go-to show whenever I'm having a bad mental health day or whenever I need to feel happy. Watching it during autumn is just a magical experience. Okay, now let's move on to movies. Again, I shared some of the most iconic movies like Dead Poets Society and You've Got Mail in my video. I will link it up here from last year. But this year I want to share some more underrated favorites, starting with Crimson Peak. I would recommend watching this film just for the Victorian Gothic aesthetic alone, but then you also have Tom Hiddleston. You don't need anything else, you know? So on a level of cozy, spooky, scary, I would say this is between spooky and scary. It follows an aspiring author who travels to this remote Gothic mansion in an English village with her new husband and a sister. And while she's there, she starts to have like these ghostly visions that haunt her in this new home, and she has to figure out what is going on and what is causing these things to happen. Everything is so autumnal and spooky. The fashion, this is a great one if you want to have a scary movie night, but you're not a fan of full-on horror movies like me. But this one will do a great job of making you scared without giving you awful nightmares. I mean, everybody's different, but I didn't have nightmares after watching this one. Now, this next one isn't spooky at all. It is purely cozy autumnal, and that is When Harry Met Sally. We all know Nora Ephron is the queen of 90s rom-coms. You've Got Mail, Sleepless in Seattle, and When Harry Met Sally is another one of the classics. The whole movie isn't set during autumn, but there are a lot of scenes of them strolling through Central Park during autumn, so it feels very autumnal. It's about these two friends who, well, they don't start out as friends, they start out as enemies. So it's an enemies to friends to lovers story. In the beginning we see them, it is autumn and they're heading off to university. At least I think Harry's heading off to university. I think she's heading off to her first job, and they very much do not get along.
I have it all figured out. It's an 18-hour trip, which breaks down into 6 shifts of 3 hours each, or alternatively, we could break it down by mileage.
I'll roll down the window.
And then the story takes place over the next few years as they have these interactions where sometimes they are friendly and sometimes not so friendly. Sometimes they're in other relationships and sometimes they're both single. It's very much in the vein of You've Got Mail. If you like You've Got Mail and you have not seen When Harry Met Sally, I highly recommend watching it. Their chemistry is phenomenal. And as usual, Billy Crystal is absolutely hilarious. It's the type of movie that you will quote for years and never forget the iconic scenes. It's a classic for a reason. Another classic that comes to mind when I think of autumnal movies is Clue. If you want to have a good time watching a movie, watch this one. We all know the board game, right? Is it Colonel Mustard in the closet with the revolver? The movie, it looks a bit cheesy, but that's because it is. But it's hilarious cheesy. It has Christopher Lloyd as Professor Plum. It also has Tim Curry. If you like whodunits and the haunted house aesthetic without it being scary, look no further than this one. And then next we have M. Night Shyamalan's The Village. This one is set in a New England agrarian type community where they live cut off from the rest of the world by these woods that surround their town. And in these woods, they believe that these dangerous creatures exist. But they have this kind of uneasy truce with the creatures that if they don't enter the woods, then the creatures won't come in, enter their small little community, and they will remain unharmed. But then when one of the young villagers becomes ill, there's this boy who loves to ignore the village elders, and he sets out to retrieve medicine. And that requires him to go in a nearby town, therefore entering the woods. If you haven't seen it, it's one of those movies that really messes with your brain. You try to figure out what's going on the whole time, and you think you know it, but then you don't. Please watch it if you haven't. And then we can't not mention Practical Magic. I mentioned the book series, but if you're not into reading, the movie is a great alternative. It stars Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman. It's set, I think, in Massachusetts. If you like the Indian summer transitioning into autumn, kind of cottagecore autumnal witchy vibes, then this would be the movie for you. It's about the two Owen sisters. They are born into this magical family that has had magic running through their blood for centuries. But these sisters have mostly avoided witchcraft because of the problems that can ensue when using it. But then one day, one of their boyfriends unexpectedly dies, and they decide that maybe it's time to actually start using their magic. So they give themselves a crash course in magic. It's the perfect witchy autumnal movie. Okay, let's move on to the final category, activities. Some of these are going to be very oddly specific. The first one is waking up on an autumnal morning where the air is a bit cool and there's dew on the grass outside, putting on your coziest sweater, grabbing a cup of something warm like chai or hot chocolate, and then climbing back into bed to watch a few episodes of Gilmore Girls or Over the Garden Wall, preferably on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning when you can just let yourself lay in bed and not do anything. And doing it myself just makes me feel so warm and like I want to go out and pick some pumpkins after or go to a scary movie that night at the cinema. Another great activity would be doing an autumnal DIY. I recently got these bows that are meant to go on a table. Then I also got these hair clips and I hot glued them on the hair clip so I can put them in my hair. It was super easy and really inexpensive. And then along with that, another great activity would be baking and trying a recipe that includes pumpkin, like pumpkin bread or pumpkin muffins or pumpkin cookies. I love experimenting with new pumpkin recipes during autumn. Another fun activity would be to spend an entire day reading. Obviously that would have to take place on the weekend. You could even maybe theme it. You could do like a dark academia reading day and maybe choose a classic like The Picture of Dorian Gray or Frankenstein. Or you could do a murder mystery whodunit day and make your way through some of the Agatha Christie books. And maybe you could even theme some of the food and treats that you're going to eat around the books that you're going to be reading that day. And then maybe even go take a walk at a park and look at the fall foliage, and then maybe lay down a blanket and read a bit while you're there. I just think that would be such a perfect autumnal day for a bookworm. Another activity you could do is practice or learn calligraphy. And if you want to be a bit more dark academia aesthetic about it, you could get some stained paper or stain some yourself using some black tea, kind of make it look like a vintage parchment paper. I have this really nice feather quill ink pen and it's so fun to write with it. I always feel like I'm studying at Hogwarts or something when I use it. This next idea is one of my favorites and I will be doing it this autumn, and that is go on a picnic in a graveyard. I learned that this is actually something they did a lot, I think, during the Victorian or Edwardian period, or maybe like kind of between the two. It's like the exact definition of cottagecore, but make it spooky and autumnal and gothic. Another activity idea would be to read vintage or thrifted books. There's something about the smell of old paper that has had multiple lives before you and picking it out at a old used bookstore that just feels very autumnal. Another fun activity would be to go to an old library and research a topic that interests you. Become familiar with the library, find a favorite spot or a favorite study desk. For me, I would maybe research Victorian deaths or causes of deaths, because if you've never looked into it, there are some crazy ways the Victorians died. I would love to spend a morning with a tote bag going to a library and just getting lost in research about Victorian deaths. I would. Another fun autumnal activity you could try is writing poetry. Write it whether it's good or bad or has any meaning or not. Poetry is also very in the realm of dark academia. And I mean, what could inspire you more than fall foliage and the changing of the weather? I just feel like it's the perfect thing to write poetry about. And then finally, the last activity I would recommend is creating a little fall corner in your house. Make it feel like fall in that little corner, because sometimes it's intimidating to try and decorate your whole house or apartment. You could put some candles, some old used vintage books. You could get a couple gold frames from a thrift store, leather notebooks, a coffee mug, a nice throw blanket, and a cozy chair. And it will just be your space, your little autumnal corner that you can go to when you want to feel cozy. So I think that's it for all of my recommendations today. If you would like some more, definitely go check out my lists on Likewise, and thank you again to Likewise for sponsoring this video. I hope you got some good recommendations to put you in the autumn spirit. I do have a lot more autumn content planned and it is coming very soon, so stay tuned for that. And until then, I'll see you guys next time. Bye, friends.